Have you ever wondered why no one really sounds like Stevie Ray Vaughan? Many of us have tried, all of us fail. I decided to go step by step and figure out why this is and if there's anything we can do to change this. And in doing so, I discovered some rather surprising things. Like, that's just so good. It seems like untouchable magic for us mere mortals, right? But when we break down Stevie's gear and style, we can discover a number of little secrets that we actually can bring into our own playing. As well, we can pinpoint the things that are truly unreachable. The easy place to start is the gear, and I'm going to do some experiments to see how close I can get to that SRV sound and figure out what matters most in achieving it. Starting with the guitar. Stevie was known for playing Stratocasters throughout his life, the most famous being the #1 First Wife. This was essentially a pre-CBS parts caster, a body from a 63 with a 62 neck, overwound pickups, and a number of odds and sods for parts. Let's take a listen to an isolated track of Stevie playing to hear this thing in action. That is just such a magnificently huge sound. Now, the closest thing I have to Stevie's guitar is my Fender Mod Shop Strat with Texas Special pickups, which are made as an homage to Stevie's. So for our first experiment here, let's see what an SRV-inspired Strat would sound like against something from the other end of the spectrum, like a Les Paul. Now, we still got a ways to go in nailing his tone, and the next thing we have to address is the strings, which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, Dojo. See, Stevie was famous for playing the thickest strings he could get his hands on, but how big of a difference does this really make? I'm going to change my strings a whole bunch of times and play through SRV's Mary Had a Little Lamb, showing you the difference between the sound of the thinnest strings up to the ultra thick ones. There you have it. When you know, it is these big fat 13s all the way. Now, I've never used strings this thick before, and even though they are so hard to play, I'm going to tough it out and use these going forward. Because here's the interesting thing, even though they're quite a bit different than the 10s that I normally play, like any Dojo string, they still feel like home. Quality, reliability, tone, you get that regardless of string gauge. Now, one thing that Stevie did to make dealing with these massive strings a little bit easier was loosen the tension of all of them and tune them down a half step. So that's what we're going to do. Next, we got to address the amp situation. Now, so far, everything you've heard has come from this 5E3 clone. It's a great amp with a 12-inch speaker in it, but it is very much not an SRV style amp. My favorite Stevie tones were coming out of a Fender Vibroverb with a 15-inch speaker in it. Here, I've got a twin reverb with a single 15-inch speaker, which is pretty comparable. See, this big amp with this big speaker has this wide open richness to its sound quality. But here's one of the things everybody gets wrong. You got to crank it up about as loud as it'll go, which is really quite loud, to get where Stevie went. For our next tone experiment, I'm going to show you what it sounds like going through that smaller amp, then this bigger amp, turned down low, and then this bigger amp turned way up high. And that right there is a big step forward, but I want to hear a bit more bite in the sound. And to do that, we're going to bring in a TS9 Tube Screamer, which is a modern version of the pedal that Stevie often used. We're going to be powering things up with the Dojo Expand Pedal Power Battery Kit. And the beautiful thing with this is you can power your pedals through the wall, or you can unplug and power up to 9 pedals for over 10 hours with the battery. And let's check out how things sound now. So here's a cool lesser known tidbit. While Stevie would play with typical celluloid picks like this one, he actually wouldn't pick with the tip, but rather the side, as you can see from the wear marks on some of the picks that he used. And I used Dojo's custom pick maker to print off some picks that pay homage to Stevie. This is the kind of pick that he would have used. It's thinner, smoother, and less pointy than my typical picks. Let's see if we can hear any difference there. Now, I can't forget to mention one of the biggest kept secrets of Stevie Ray Vaughan's tone. This is one of those things that nobody ever talks about. But after Stevie had recorded his guitar parts, he'd often add in some chorus through a Roland Dimension D unit. I've got a plugin that duplicates this. I'm going to bring it in and out. Listen as it makes the guitar sound wider. And that's about as close as a normal person can come to Stevie's gear, and given the limitations, I'm content with the results. We went from sounding like this to now sounding like this. Now, the next thing we gotta talk about is note choice, actually playing the guitar. I spend a lot of time lifting and analyzing SRV solos, which is the best way to get into somebody's musical psyche. And here's the thing, there's actually nothing within Stevie's note choices that isn't recreatable with a bit of effort. So let me show you some habits and ideas that can get you getting that sound. Stevie's musical lineage has roots in early rock and roll, and with that, you get these great bluesy double stop licks. You mix in some Albert King style bends, which has a huge role in his sound too. One of the things I love about Stevie's playing is he's a very rhythmically interesting player. He mixes and matches note lengths, keeping it unpredictable, something like this. And he was a master in outlining different chords in different ways. So over top of the second chord in a blues progression, he'd often play something like this. And in a more practical setting, listen how that lick nicely highlights the chord change. As well, one of his common tendencies was to do these vocal-style melismas or trail-offs at the end of his lines. So while some guitar players might play something simple like this, Stevie would stretch that out at the end like this. And these are just a few of his tendencies. It would take a lifetime of studying him and his influences to really understand the depth of his musicality. And I will say, there are some musicians who have savant, genius abilities to improvise, but I don't put Stevie in that category. He's imitatable. Note choices are not where the hurdle lies. And if you want to dive into more of this stuff, you can come join us over at my course platform, the Samurai Guitar Dojo. See, over there we do weekly lessons, and we just started in on a new block where we're going to break down some Stevie Ray Vaughan style rhythms, as well as an in-depth look at how you could approach soloing over top of this. And if you use the link in the description for $7.50 a month, you're going to gain access to that, the entire back catalog of Dojo lessons, as well as all of my other courses. I'd love to see you over there. Anyways, let's get back to it. And so now that brings me to what I believe is the ultimate barrier in trying to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, the real reason why someone like me will never get quite there no matter how hard we try. His physical touch on the guitar is the secret. It's what made him so unique. It's what made him one of a kind. See, he somehow managed to play the guitar with the ferocity of a wolverine, but with the dexterity of a hummingbird. And my only explanation is he had this incredibly rare combination of freakishly strong hands that were also incredibly agile. See, the intensity that Stevie played with makes such a huge difference. Let me play a lick as I would normally play it, and then let me try to bring in Stevie's energy. See, here's the thing. I can do that for 5 seconds, and then I've exhausted my hand and my forearm. But Stevie did that solo after solo, night in, night out, and he did that with these telephone wire thick strings. It's inhuman ferocity, but for him, it's effortless. And he played so fast with such pure accuracy and interesting dynamics. And just like there's a physical barrier between me and, I don't know, an NHL hockey player, that same barrier exists between us normal people and Stevie Ray Vaughan. And we haven't even mentioned it, but on top of this all, his groove was so immaculate. The way that he would place his notes within the rhythmic beat always feels so incredible. And this is something personal and hard to replicate. You put all these things together and you end up with this unique brilliance that speaks to so many of us. You watch videos of SRV playing and it's like a man bearing his soul for the world through his guitar. It's incredible, and that's why he still keeps so many of us captivated. And so with all that, let me show you my best Stevie Ray Vaughan impression, and you can be the judge of how close I got. Now, I'm gonna wrap things up with this idea. I think the best thing to do with our influences is try really, really hard to sound like them, but then accept that we're never gonna do Stevie Ray Vaughan better than Stevie Ray Vaughan. You take what you can from them, you take what you can from the other guy, as well as this guy and this guy too. You mix it all together and you find yourself with this musical stew of influences that's unique to you, and that ends up being your individual voice. Remember, if you want to learn more about the playing style of Stevie Ray Vaughan, that's the focus of the next block that we're doing over at the Samurai Guitar Dojo. If you want to join us over there for weekly lessons, as well as gain access to all my other courses, use the link in the description and you're going to get in for $7.50 a month. As well, I got links to all the Dojo stuff that I used in the description as well. Thank you all for watching. Until next time, look after yourselves, look after each other, look after the planet. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I'll see you again soon.